Alright, welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And as promised, we're going to do a gameplay video of Axis and Allies 1914. So everything is all set up here and raring to go. And I think Germany might have an interesting strategy to try out here, and we'll see. And we'll see how it goes. Alright, talk to you in a little bit. Well, to quote Tommy Lee Jones after the train wreck in that movie The Fugitive, my, what a mess. I didn't do it as well as he does, but holy cow, things are really squirrely here. So we'll just start with Austro-Hungary, as the game starts with. They took Serbia pretty handily. They actually took everything out. They lost a couple guys doing it, but there you have it. And they actually took their guys here from Galicia and attacked the Ukraine and held it until the Russian turn, when the Russians took it back. But as normal, we got here into Tyrolia, and they're doing their thing there and tying up Italian money. In fact, the Italians are down to I think it's just the one guy and the two artillery there now. So yeah, so it's things are looking pretty sparse there for the Italians up north. But the Germans came in here, caused some grief, and the Russians counterattacked, and we got a bit of a stalemate there. Not a lot of hits either way on the counterattack. Lots of 5s and 6s. The Germans also, of course, took Denmark and Holland and Belgium. And the French, who usually, are able to get things into more things here into the center, decided to send some stuff down to Italy. Why, you might ask? Well, because the Germans have brought down their big stack from Munich. And it looks like they're coming here to try to kick Italy out of the game by around 4. Which mathematically is quite possible, the way this is all set up. And so the French actually pulled a couple of guys from North Africa over to here, and they pulled their stack from Burgundy south instead of going up there. So the French are a little thin there, but again, so are the Germans, because usually in Alsace right now there'd be, their stack of 11 men and 3 artillery that are indeed down here. So the Germans are a little weak right here. Of course, they have their reinforcements that can come pouring in. But the Italians look like they're going to be pretty hard pressed. Typical stuff in Africa, where the Germans nickel and dime for a while until the Brits are able to take care of them. Basically, these guys just trade money the whole game until the Germans are taken out. That's typically how it goes in our games. Not sure about yours. The British, of course, come down here, get some free troops down in Arabia. And the British also took out Persia. Only lost one fella doing that, or 2 fellas. Oh, 2 fellas. No, 1 fella, because they brought one guy over to Arabia. The Ottomans went up and took Sevastopol, of course, because it was empty. And also took Bulgaria and got some stuff there. Oh, we forgot to mobilize their units. So we got to mobilize some units for Bulgaria. Italy activated Albania, and so a little bit of a concern there, but probably not for too long, because the Austro-Hungarians have got a lot of guys in Trieste they can bring down. So yeah, but it's a mess. Oh, also the one thing I wanted to mention was the British fleet, which is pretty much no more. The Germans came in and did this. It cost them a damaged battleship and 3 subs, but they took out the British battleship, cruiser, and transport. The Allied fleet is coagulating over here, but the Germans, I don't know, they probably won't try to hit that. They might retreat, but for at least one round they didn't have to worry about the British coming into Belgium via amphibious assault. So there's that. And just as a note, we are not playing with the Russian Revolution rule. So as you all know, if you're a fan of this game, that tilts it slightly in favor of the Allies. But we will see. And nothing's for certain in any of these sorts of games where the dice are rolling fast and furious. But we will let you know what happens here on round 2. Alright, here we go with Round two, and you hear some music in the background. I just got a variety of theme music going on. I think this is Gears of War or something. My son's doing his best Buddy Rich imitation upstairs. He's the drummer, and kind of drowns it out a little bit. So, alright, so what we got going on here, we'll talk about the Austro-Hungarians. Obviously they made short work of the little bit that was left in Venice, but it did hold them up for a turn. And they also tried to take Albania, but were unsuccessful. Albania held on with 2 units left. They left a guy in Serbia, of course, in case the Albania campaign didn't go well. Little thin over here. They've decided to move some more guys. Russia took Galicia and are causing a bit of pain there. So the Russians right now are actually just, when they collected their money actually, because the Ottomans weren't in here yet, the Russians were actually up by $3 on round 2, which is rather unheard of. But as we know, there's a reason for that, and that is because the Germans have decided to send a bunch of stuff south instead of into Russia, which has allowed the French to punch a hole here into the Alsace-Lorraine pocket, and that could cause a bit of grief for the Germans. So we'll see how that goes. They did hold on to Belgium, and they have so many troops in there that had the French come in on their own before they had that big tall stack there. Had they come in on their own, they would have probably just lost everybody, and the Germans still would have held the territory. So French decided to stay out till some British reinforcements could come in. You may have noticed on the last turn that there were 2 artillery and 2 British guys here, and there was only 1 transport. Yeah, there's a double transport move there, so we fixed that. Over here, the Russians counterattacked and whittled the Germans down to a single man in artillery. And as you know, if you're in that territory at the start of your turn, you don't move anybody in, then you don't need to attack. So the Germans decided not to attack, of course, because they undoubtedly would have lost those guys. Alright, then we have down in Africa, the Germans are all coagulating here, and surrounded now by the British, and the French decided to come down as well. And we'll see what goes on there. Even the Italians are kind of getting in on it. And the Ottomans lost Transjordan, and or almost lost Transjordan. Got all the way down to 1 each. They did take Saudi Arabia from the Brits, because the Brits threw everybody from Egypt and Saudi Arabia into Transjordan. And we're almost able to take it. But the Ottomans held, and they're bringing some reinforcements down from Smyrna. Mesopotamia, though, looks like it's on its own, and it's looking kind of hard-pressed here by the big stack of British gear, and they put a fighter in here as well. Russians took back Sevastopol, killing that lone Ottoman troop. So things are going pretty well. The Americans decided to bring over 6 units, and they took Spanish Morocco for the loss of 1 guy. So they'll make that money back in 3 rounds, I guess. But it looks like they're trying to help out the Italians here. Now the Italians have a pretty fat stack of guys here. I don't think they're in a huge, bit of trouble. The Italians and the Germans certainly have enough stuff defense-wise, but coming at it one at a time, not exactly sure what's going to happen there, but if they're going to do it, they better do it faster rather than slower, because the Italians are able to reinforce much more easily, and with the mobility of the Americans and whatnot coming over, that could cause grief too. Very interesting game though. The naval line has been drawn now between those 2 sea zones, and the Germans, of course, scampered home. But I think they might be in for a surprise if the French battleships decide to head in there and cause some grief. So that's pretty much it. People who are up in money are people like the Germans, of course. Austria-Hungary was up, and I think they are still up by 1. The Brits are up by about 3. And the French on this last turn actually went up. because they did take the Belgian Congo thanks to the transport. They grabbed their guy from Gold Coast, brought him over, and Bob's your uncle there. They took Belgian Congo, and the British came down from Anglo-Egypt, Sudan to help them out. You may notice that we haven't changed the board here for the money, and that's simply because we just look at the plus minus and do it that way. Instead of moving these discs all over the place, it's a lot easier to just add a couple of numbers here and there. So that's what we do. Alright, well, that is round 2, and we will see what happens round 3. Let's see if the Austro-Hungarians are meaning what they're meaning here. There is also the chance that they could go through Piedmont and start moving up towards Paris that way. But the Germans cannot ignore what's going on here. So we'll see what happens on turn 3. Alright, here we are at the end of turn 3. We'll be heading into turn 4, and this is probably the weirdest game that I've ever played of this. Well, let's get to it here. The Austro-Hungarians have pushed deep into Italy, and they took the Italian stack all the way down. I don't know if you can differentiate, but 1 artillery and 1 man are all that's left for the Italians after Austria-Hungary, and then after them the Germans came in. So the Americans decided to drop off there instead of in Rome, the thought being that if they could hold on there and tie up those forces for 1 more round, well, hey, then maybe things will work out okay for Italy, because their stacks are dwindling for Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary, I think, has 8 men and 6 or 7 artillery, and although that still outnumbers what everybody has down here, that with the Germans, the Italians can replenish more quickly. So we'll see what happens, though. I mean, the Austro-Hungarians could roll really well, take everything out, and then the Germans could come through and hop right into Rome and take Naples with 1 guy, and that might be it for Italy at that point, but we'll see what happens. Elsewhere, Austria-Hungary was able to take care of Albania. They now own all of that. Shoring up the line here, because the Russians are not really under a lot of stress. They're at par right now. Got some guys in Romania. Neither of them wanted to attack each other this round, really. The Ottomans played nicely, because the Ottomans have troubles of their own. As you can see, there you go. We got these guys here. The Brits have moved in, causing some grief there. Ottomans had a really good attack, though, when they both actually did a lot of damage. But over in Transjordan, the British are gone. You can see that. The British had 4 units there, and the Ottomans had 7. And every single unit in the battle got a hit. So the Turks lost their 4 guys, and the British got wiped out. So the music you hear is from Lone Survivor. So that's this guy here. He's trying to run up and maybe lend a hand, a bit of a block here in Egypt. But the Ottomans go first, so the British may have to use their transport and bring a guy over to Egypt to stop an easy 2 from happening. Down in Africa, we did finally have our little battle between the Germans and the Brits. And Germans did all right. They killed a couple or 3 guys, but they also lost 3 units. So they're down to two men in Africa. That's all the Germans have left. Americans moved over a fighter and a man on the transport and built another couple transports and some stuff to bring over for the next round. Now in Central Europe, some interesting stuff happened here. The Germans evacuated Belgium, pulled everything out, and slammed down here into Lorraine here. And they took it. So the French had to respond, and they sent everything they had in there from Picardy. And of course they couldn't dislodge all the Germans, but they made a good show of it. But then France had to pull back from here from Piedmont into Burgundy. Obviously, because you know, as much as they love the Italians, they love Paris a bit more. And if Paris falls in this game, that makes things really, really tough on the Allies. Germany can then put a bunch of steel in the water, and it's very difficult to get back on there. And if Paris falls, that's usually just a game ender anyway. But the French went up to Belgium with a single troop because it was empty, and the British were going to go into Lorraine to kind of shore this area up, but they decided, we're going to go into Belgium. I think the reasoning behind that is that it gives the Germans a moment of pause up here in the north, whereas before, if they pile them in there, it's just a single target. But now you can see the French have, stretched out their line here, and the Germans have to match them. And the Germans, having sent all these guys down here hoping to take care of Italy in 4 turns, which isn't going to happen unless the rolls are absolutely... No, I don't think it can happen. No, because Austro-Hungary has to go first, and they can't get rid of... Well, they can get rid of that, but the Germans only roll 6 dice, and Italy's got like a dozen things in there, so... That maneuver failed, so the Germans may choose actually to go north into Piedmont. We'll see what happens there. They are starting to bulk up again here on the eastern front, but as you know, Russia will go first, so they'll probably move a guy into Silesia, and Galicia may take a pounding here. So we'll see what happens. But the Germans do have an awful lot of interest now in the eastern front, so I think the Russians better be careful about that. But that's pretty much it. That's all that went on. We'll come back with the wrap-up of turn 4 right after this. Alright, turn 4 is well and truly done. And more ominous music now, because it looks like the Allies are probably going to pull this one out, but we'll see here. We'll see if this whole German idea to head south and take care of Italy is going to work. But let's see here. We'll check out the Western Front here for the Germans. And they came in there with a big stack and took out Lorraine. But of course left Alsace empty, and the French snuck in there, little cheeky buggers. And the British came in and took the Ruhr. So the Germans are losing a little bit of money now. But they haven't lost it yet, right? Because they collect at the end of their turn, not now. So they'll probably take it back and not actually have lost anything. Meanwhile, they're still 2 steps from Paris. The French just built 10 men this last time. And yes, you're saying the French are getting 30? Yeah, they're doing pretty well, because they were only down by the 2 here in Lorraine, and Belgium they had 2 for, so that helped them out. They got the extra 3 there. And down in Africa, they got a couple extra bucks going on here with Khartoum and the Belgian Congo. So French have been doing okay. They also snuck here into Tyrolia from Venice and decided to cause some grief there. So they actually got quite a bit of money this last round. I think they got 35, and they saved a couple, so they got 37 bucks for next round. So I think it's looking like an Allied victory. We'll play one more round, and we'll let you know how it goes. But we'll see here. The Eastern Front. Germans have moved in a fairly large stack, and because of this, because the Russians came into Galicia and came in lock, stock, and smoke and barrel. You notice though that it's only 1 step away from Vienna, and the Austro-Hungarians really don't have an awful lot to help them out. They've got like 5 guys and a couple artillery that they can move in, and of course their build can go there. But it is possible for that stack of Russian stuff to come in and actually kill Vienna. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on. The only option the Austrians really have is to attack Galicia and tie down all those Russians. So that's probably what they're going to do. Although they could lose a lot of stuff because, well, that's a big mess there. Over in Italy, the Italians look like they're going to hold on here. The Germans and the Austro-Hungarians haven't moved anything this way since round 2, really, so they're running out of steam. Americans were able to bring over a man and a fighter on that transport, and have shuttled over a couple of more guys here, a couple troops, and of course are building more guys to take care of things next round. Over the Ottomans here, they decided to retreat a bit into Constantinople from Bulgaria. They came south. seeing that the Austro-Hungarians, at the time anyway, they look like they're going to handle things here in the south of Russia. It's all wide open right now. So a couple of guys are going to pick up $6 for the Austro-Hungarians next turn. But on this side here, the Brits were able to dismantle the Mesopotamian Ottoman army and took care of that, and built a couple of tanks as well. So the Ottomans are in a way now. They're at par still. They're still making their 16 because they lose the 3 for Mesopotamia, but they got the 3 for Bulgaria. And they also decided to just be a little snarky here, and they come over and they had 1 man and 2 artillery versus 2 men and 3 men for the Brits. And the Brits got 2 hits and the Ottomans only got the 1. So that Ottoman fellow is probably not long for this world. Not sure if I pointed this out already. The Brits pacified the Germans down there, and just 1 German left in Africa, up in Togo. The Germans did do something interesting though, because I think they saw this these big fleets here and thought, well, shoot, we don't want them to come in here and start landing in Kiel and taking Denmark and Holland for free. So they built a couple of subs, and that was enough to keep the French player from entertaining any thoughts of coming in there, because now there's 3 subs, 2 cruisers, and a battleship, and the French just can't compete with that at all. Plus the mines. As you know, when you go in, each ship has a dice roll, and if it gets a 1, it's a hit. So it'll damage the battleship and sink everything else. So, all right. Well, that's pretty much it here. Really looking like the Allies have got this one, though. Russia is just choosing to build up. They could take a beating on the economy next round, though. They might be down to about like 12 or 13 bucks. So they will have to be careful, especially if this army gets wiped out this round. Then Russia could be in trouble. So we'll keep tabs on that, and we'll let you know what happens on turn 5. Alright, we're not done turn 5. But I just want to show you what's happened here. So Austria-Hungary sent everything that it could into Galicia, and yeah, the Russians rolled, I think 2 misses out of that huge stack. Now obviously they took a pounding too. Not like the Austro-Hungarians were shooting blanks or anything, but the Habsburg Empire took it on the nose there, and so the Russians then came back and they were able to wipe out the rest of the Austro-Hungarian stuff. So the Germans now have a decision to make. Are they going to go north? This is a good move by the Russian player. So the Germans have to realize there's a threat there. Well, they just head straight for Moscow, but then they're surrounded on 3 sides by the Russians. And are they going to try to take the pressure off Vienna? Because Vienna doesn't have much going for it right now. It probably could tie up this stuff and build again and be okay, but I mean, you know, Vienna does have to take care of this Tyrolean French guy, so they got to send at least a couple or 3 things that way just to assure that they kill it. Plus, they are now in a real dogfight over here. They could actually see Italy go on the offensive. So it's a real interesting moment here for the German player. Just thought I'd show you the mid-turn, and the music is very dramatic. So, alright, well, we'll let you know how it turns out. Well, what an exciting round that was. Alright, let's start down here in the Ottoman Empire and the steadily shrinking Ottoman Empire. They never seem to do well if the British player utilizes the whole let's build an India thing, which Britain tends to only do if they're kicking butt over in Europe, like if the Germans are held at bay, which in this game they have been. So the Brits this last round, they're throwing down some serious stuff, and the Ottomans just don't have the horses to compete. They're making 15 bucks now, and it's you know, they don't even bother taking back the Syrian desert because that'll just divide their forces, and you know, their big stack, you know, the medium stack would just get thumped. So Yeah, they've just gone into turtle mode here, hoping to hold on until maybe the rest of the board can right itself. But nothing left here but the crying. Germans are still alive. One guy, you know, the annoying fellow, but I don't think he's long for this world. Americans continue to bring stuff over to Africa and thence to Rome. Rome is definitely holding on, and the Italians with their $12 got cheeky and built artillery this round. So I think that the Habsburg and the Kaiser here, I think they've decided to perhaps not worry about taking Rome. But for what it's worth, Italy was out of the game. All they did was build men, and they really had no impact on the game except to tie up, you know, that first surge of German troops. And the Germans did not get, dramatic music. There you go. They did not get any closer to Paris. In fact, the French hammered them, and then the British hammered them and kicked them out of Lorraine. Germans did recoup their territory, although we have that cheeky Frenchman who decided to go up here and make more of a French nuisance of himself and took Munich. So there's a couple of territories there that need to be taken back. Now, I had asked you earlier, what would you do in this situation? And the German player decided he was going to come south. So he came down to Ukraine, he beat up a small Russian detachment, only took one hit, so that was pretty good for him. And it also got him away from the two big stacks. But he did split his forces. And he brought enough down here to take down that huge stack of artillery. Well, it wasn't huge, I think there were 9 or something. But he took down that big stack of arty. You can see there's a dark red chip under there. So he had about 20 some dice, and he took down enough. But he couldn't get rid of all of it. And then he brought his reinforcements south, but it's still adjacent to Poland, which they still hold. And then built some tanks and men and artillery there. So the Germans have definitely solidified things at home. Just got to get rid of the Frenchmen there. But they've kind of got things, they batten down the hatches pretty well here. And there aren't really an awful lot of troops. We've had some real slugfests. I mean, we've played this game where we've had, you know, the stacks are towering to the ceiling, and we run out of chips. That's why I go and buy all the extra chips I have, because we were using dimes and pennies and nickels and anything we could to, you know, denote more troops. But the Russians, they're down a little bit on cash. The British were able to come and take Sevastopol back from the lone Austro-Hungarian that was here, but the Russians missed out on that $3. And now next turn, unless they can dislodge the Ukraine task force here, they'll be out those 3. And they're probably not going to want to muck things up here, but I think the Austro-Hungarians are probably going to take care of that little Russian detachment there. So, although it really looks like the Allies have things well in hand, they certainly do here. You know, France is still making in the 30s. Italy is about to be completely liberated, I'd suspect, in the next couple rounds. Africa and the Middle East are not a problem. It's really looking like an Allied win. But we're going to play one more round, and we'll see if anything really big comes out of this, or if maybe the Axis, I guess I should be saying the Entente and the Central Powers, so I'll start doing that. We'll see if the Central Powers can come up with a bit of a trick to save their bacon. Alright, we'll let you know how turn 6 turns out right after this. Well, I'm not sure if you can hear the music in the background, but it's some Hans Zimmer music from Inception, and it's called The Dream is Collapsing. And I think this is it here at the end of turn 6. We haven't even moved the American stuff yet, so if we did, just more stuff would be in Italy, and that would seal the deal there, I think. Sometimes difficult to call games because you can see opportunity here and there, but I think the math is just going to bear this out, and we'll just tell you what's going on here. So the Germans have been booted fully out of France, and they've even lost Alsace to the French. How embarrassing is that? They've been kicked out of Belgium. And although they do have stacks of stuff here, they are dwindling. Their economy is dwindling. Their fleet is bottled up. There's nowhere it can go. And there's nowhere for the Germans to really make a lot of extra money. Now, they were able to take care of things over here, and but they find themselves kind of in a situation they really don't want to be in. The Russians everybody got a hit, and the Germans got a couple of hits, but the tanks absorbed those. I think they lost a couple men, maybe. Boy, that's ominous music. Romania fell to the Brits coming in from Sevastopol here, and although they didn't advance here, it is inevitable. They're just stacking everything up for the final push. They did take Transjordan, and again the Turks didn't really feel like coming out to play, so the Italian troop in Egypt hopped on his transport and in a cheeky move took Albania, with nary an enemy troop within range of him, so he'll be hanging on to that and probably taking something else next turn. The Italians are now going to march up the boot, up to the top, and you can see the French stack there. Yeah, those are both the 5s, right? So there's like 11 French guys there coming through, and they got a fighter with them. So the Allies, the Entente, are all starting to build fighters. And the Central Powers, although Austria built one this last turn because it doesn't have any, I thought it would have one at least. But the British are building a fighter almost every turn, and as you know, if you've got a stack of artillery to go with it, that's pretty nasty. So the German foray into Russia is pretty much over here. They've got a little bit of stuff, but not even close to what the Russians are mobilizing. Plus they've got all these problems here to deal with. And yeah, who knows what's going to happen shortly, but it seems to be over. And those are finishing notes, I think, on the Central Powers. So we're going to call this an Entente victory. And yeah, thanks for watching. Just some finishing notes, finishing thoughts was we were saying that moving those 12 German troops down south here instead of into France, although it seemed like a good idea, it really took them a few turns to actually cause a lot of grief. It seems like Austro-Hungary can handle Italy pretty much on her own anyway. But when you bring the Germans down here, not only does it weaken your push west, it encourages the French to step in and help out Italy with their own troops. So you're just fighting the French in a different place, and in a place that it's harder for you to actually reinforce. So yeah, it was a nice try, and the dice rolls were actually pretty good for the Central Powers. Not a lot of complaints, but I think it just allowing Britain to shore up stuff here and allowing the French, like Paris was never really in trouble. I can't remember, I don't think the Germans even got into Burgundy. So if that doesn't happen, then the French are typically doing pretty well. The Russian Revolution rule never even came close to being used, even if it did. So yeah, so a big victory for the Entente here, and bit of a boot kicking to the Central Powers, but hey, it was a lot of fun, and thank you so much for watching. Leave your comments below, and hey, don't forget, folks, hug your loved ones, tell your friends how much they mean to you, and let everybody know that life's better when you're just having fun playing lots of board games. Alright, thanks so much for watching today, folks. Take care and have a really, really great week.